Gift of the Martyr. IB was held captive. The stolen ritual wand was sealed inside the core of a Mekk-Knight blue sky, its power source. She'd been captured forcibly, but up to this point, the Mekk-Knights hadn't laid a hand on her. IB was deep in thought.
The Great Darkness is using the crawlers to threaten humankind. What if humankind's perception of the Mekk-Knights had been wrong all along?
Meanwhile, Orym and the party arrived at the base of the Mekk-Knights after their long quest to rescue IB. Ruins of a forgotten civilization lay before them. The husks of decayed buildings long buried by crustal movements barely broke the ancient Earth's surface. Among them, artificial forms lay untouched in pristine condition. There the activated World Legacy World Shield shone brightly, and the World Legacy known as the World Lance rose sharply out of the earth. Even with the power of the World Chalice, it was a fool's errand to challenge the Mekk-Knights. Following Lee's words, Orym and the group decided on a sneak attack on the World Shield. Before the party, a knight appeared, then another. Previously they wouldn't have stood a chance, but now it was different. They had to rescue IB. Their determination made them fight with blood-curdling ferocity. Sensing danger, the Mekk-Knights transformed into a united form, the Mekk-Knight Spectrum Supreme. Orym and friends battled the Mekk-Knight Spectrum Supreme, the culmination of the Mekk-Knight's power, with all their might. As the tide turned in the battle, Mingursa gathered his strength and put his all into one decisive strike of his spear. However, his attack was parried by the Mekk-Knight Spectrum Supreme, opening a large hole in the wall. The already fragile ruins couldn't withstand the impact and began to collapse. Before the dust settled, so as not to be noticed by the Mekk-Knight Spectrum Supreme, Mingursa directed a subtle glance toward Lee. Noticing his glance, Lee nodded slightly and slipped from the battlefield. She'd signaled her intentions, to infiltrate the base alone and rescue IB. Lee flew feverishly before finally arriving at IB. IB breathed a sigh of relief when she saw Lee there, unharmed. But her relief was short-lived as she learned that the others were battling the Mekk-Knights. Maybe it was they who were wrong to battle the Mekk-Knights. To know the truth, she had to stop the battle immediately. As IB uttered those words, Lee, who stood in front of her, now slowly turned around. Upon their first meeting, Lee had greeted IB with the warm smile of a fairy. But her smile had transformed, now blackened and hideous. Terrified, IB sought to scream, but her consciousness was consumed by deep darkness before she could utter a noise. Orym and the others continued to battle. All of a sudden, an explosion occurred inside the facility. Immediately, Orym felt as if the World Chalice awakened again, though the feeling was now greatly intensified. Everyone on the battlefield stopped fighting, transfixed at that moment. Just then, a figure appeared. She was standing on the mountain of the debris before them. It was the visage of IB, unmistakable from head to toe. But her face betrayed something sinister. Her eyes glowed mysteriously, and an evil aura emanated from her body. These signs suggested that the figure before them was not the IB they knew. Her laughter was nothing like that of IB. She now spoke to the confused group.
I am Lee. This body is now mine.
Sweet IB was no longer here. The feminine resonance of her voice was now poisoned with a booming dissonance. Orem and the others glared at her with confusion and anger. Meeting their gaze, Nightmare Corruptor Abli emitted a force field. The force field now forcibly absorbed the power of the World Chalice within Orem and the others, and now, it threatened to take their lives. However, it would be the Mekk-Knight Spectrum Supreme, whom they'd been fighting to the death just moments before, who would rescue them. Throwing itself at them, the power of Abli was so great it caused the form of the Mekk-Knight Spectrum Supreme to become unjoined. Separated into 7, the Mekk-Knights were severely damaged. Then Abli, with a familiar hand, proceeded to extract the cores from each of the Mekk-Knights, one by one. It was now clear there was great danger in Abli possessing both the power of IB as well as that of the ritual wand. Seeking to prevent this, the Mekk-Knight Blue Sky sought to transfer control of the wand to someone other than IB. Showing considerable growth in battle, Orem was the one chosen as the wand's successor. Abli's power created a shockwave that launched Orem to the edge of the cliff. The Mekk-Knight Blue Sky stretched out its arm to help him. Wordlessly their gaze met. Orem sensed in his heart that the knight was trying to convey something when a dazzling light shone suddenly. The next moment, Orem, adorned in new armor, not of the World Chalice, and holding a sword in each hand, stood at the edge of the cliff as Mekk-Knight Avram, successor to the ritual wand. Once owned by IB, the ritual wand was passed down through generations in the village of the Forest of the Stars. It was the key to the fate of the stars and held the power to unlock the world legacies. In a split-second decision, Orem had been chosen to succeed the wand, not by the wand's controller, IB, but by the Mekk-Knights. Then, the succession of the key was split into 2, just like its pair sword was. Knowing IB, resting inside of her, still possessed the key's power, Iblis set off to gain possession of the world lance before Orem could reach it. Orem chased after her, determined to stop her. However, in his path stood the nightmare beasts, born from the power contained in the cores that Iblis stole from the Mekk-Knights. Orem, having just received his new powers, had to contend with the formidable strength of the 6 nightmare beasts. Now Ningirsu, who'd rushed to Orem's side along with Embark, said to him,
"We'll hold them back, you go ahead."
His voice was quiet but resolute. Having lost the power of the World Chalice, Ningirsu knew he would be powerless to stop Abli, even if he could catch her. Without waiting for Orem's reply, Ningirsu leaped out facing the beasts, spear in hand. Though nearly powerless, Ningirsu still deftly handled his spear as if possessed. As the nightmare mermaid was crushed, the beasts all turned their heads toward the spear wielder in unison. He must have wanted to pursue his little sister more than anybody else. Orem took off to pursue Abli and the World Lance, with the determination of Ningirsu as the wind in his sails. Left alone, Ningirsu continued to fight by himself, his roars echoing throughout the battlefield. Orem rushed to the base of the World Lance, but it was too late. By the time he arrived, Iblis had already finished activating the World Lance. With the newfound power of the World Lance, Iblis launched an aggressive assault on Orem. With such destructive force that each blow shook the earth, Orem faced the attacks alone. In the face of those attacks, Orem now lay wounded on the ground. Iblis moved to pick up Orem's discarded sword, now swinging it over and over, as if to check its weight. Then Iblis moved in closer to inflict the final blow on Orem. Orem couldn't move his upper body, let alone stand up. Just as Iblis raised the sword to strike, a small shadow emerged from Orem's cloak. The young dragon Embark summoned his otherworldly power between the young boy and girl, determined to help his companions in their time of crisis with whatever he could muster. That power suppressed the evil that dwelled in IB, if only for a moment. By suppressing Lee's evil spirit, the spirit of IB that had resided deep in the depths had now awakened. Orem laid on the ground powerless. Embark was exhausted of his powers and unable to move. And IB was now holding a sword in her hand. Realizing her situation, she made her decision. Only she could put an end to Lee's evil desires. Her hand that held the sword now tensed with strength. Lee realized IB's intentions and tried to resist, but IB's awakened spirit overcame her. She sees a flashback of her childhood friend desperately calling in her direction. The young girl drew short, rapid breaths, points the blade towards herself and... When Ningirsu arrived at the scene, he saw his childhood friend holding the limp body of his little sister in his arms, repeatedly calling her name. At the cruel end of this surreal scene, the older brother could do nothing but stand there, stunned and speechless.